everybody. Welcome to All Things Grace. I am Dr. Michelle Majors. I am your host today, and we are going to try this again because I just had I forgot to record. So Jevon is going to be very gracious and restate the first part of the show with us today here. But so today we are exploring the intersection of grace and resilience and strategy and success. And joining us today is business consultant, coach, keynote speaker, author, and U.S. Army veteran Jevon Wooden. So Jevon has a master's degree in cybersecurity from Fordham University and an MBA from University of Maryland and 12 years of military experience, including a Bronze Star. So Jevon, thank you so much for bringing a wealth of knowledge and experience to the table today, and looking forward to hearing about some of the things that Forbes was able to find out about in Entrepreneur Magazine and Fast Company and these other publications that understand and wanted to bring awareness to your work and your strategies of helping people bring grace to their entrepreneurial journey. So thank you so much for being here, Jevon.
Thank you so much for having me, Dr. Majors. I appreciate you sharing your space and your podcast and your platform with me. And I'm excited to talk all things grace.
All right. So first, let's go back a little bit and let's talk about, I'm taking notes. So if you see my eyes going around because ideas come to me and I have to catch them. First, let's talk about, first, thank you for your service to our country. That's first and foremost. Second, can you share your journey? Like, what led you to become a business coach? And just kind of share your story of that evolution.
Yeah, I mean, I always say coaching found me. I actually started my company, which was formerly called Live Not Loathe and is now Bright Mind Consulting Group. I started it on my last deployment in Afghanistan in 2017. I knew that I loved serving others. I knew that my military journey was going to conclude, just didn't have the passion in me anymore. Body was breaking down. Emotionally, mentally, didn't want to deal with all that came with either. And then at that point, I was in the civilian side of my military career, and I was in cybersecurity. I said, this pays the bills, but it does not feed my soul. So what else can I do? And I started looking. I knew motivational speaking was always a thing that I've done, but I was like, there has to be another way to serve more intimately, right? Because speaking, you're on the stage, and then what? So I did a Google search and found coaching. So I just went down that rabbit hole. It's like, what is coaching? Because I was thinking head coach, like sports, but it's so different from that. And when I got into that coaching journey, I was just like, who's coming to me? Just happened to be, business leaders and owners who seem to need those services and need to give themselves grace more than others. So that's how I got started.
And so when someone comes to you for support, from whatever perspective, whatever realm, whatever the door they're walking through to get support from you, what is it that you're listening for? What is it that you're looking for or listening for to see, is this person ready to work with me? Is there a particular criteria or thing that you are looking for in that person to determine readiness?
Absolutely. There's a number of things that I'm looking for. So first and foremost, what is the problem, and do they deem it as big enough to have a coach, right? Because that's first and foremost. The second thing I'm looking for is their mentality. So language tells a lot. So if we say cost versus investment, if we, use a lot of language that's, kind of standoffish or seems kind of hesitant, I look for that. And just what's not being said. Are they blaming others for what it is? Do they take accountability for themselves? Do they even know what the root cause of where they are now is? Where are they looking to go? So there's a lot of things that I look for when I'm on that call with them initially, before I say, yes, I think we're a fit. And then another thing is, are they coachable, right? Are they willing to, open their minds to kind of get that paradigm shift that coaching is known for? Are they willing to go against their philosophies, so to speak, to kind of get to become that new person or grow that business in the way that I know is possible?
So do you have a coach?
I
And
do. I just should have a coach.
would you say you're coachable?
I am sometimes, right? I am. So it's right. So
Yeah. Tell the
so
truth.
I think we all go through that, knowing we know what we know, and sometimes it's like that sounds counterintuitive.
Mhm.
But you just give it a shot and like, okay, let
Yeah.
me be open. So it's tough sometimes for sure.
How do you move around like your own inner resistance, your own inner coachability? Does the coach pull you out of it, or do you have a grounding place where you're able to move out of it, move past it?
Yeah, I'm definitely able to move past it because I'm very self aware, so I can kind of pay attention where I'm putting up those walls. And I
Mhm.
would venture to say it's probably because I've gone through so much coach training that I can kind of feel it. It feels different. The
Mhm.
verbiage is different again. So I just like to pay attention to how I'm responding, what I'm saying inside, and all those other things that really give us cues to if we're open or we're coming in there from a closed mindset.
So you know that like grace is my jam. I'm all about like how to bring grace to these different conversations, to these different realms that we navigate in. How do you bring grace to your coaching practice, to your clients? When do you feel that I always have to give grace in this particular area or in this particular way that we find that's the themes, right? That is
Mhm.
most frequently needed in a particular area when you are working with a client.
Absolutely. I find that when we get into personal stories, that's where grace really shows up heavily, because we all have those experiences that we kind of feel like we may be judged about, or maybe we're not proud of. So when we get to those points in the coaching conversation, if they come up, that's typically where most of the grace is really needed, to let them know that this is a non-judgmental space, right? I am not here to make you feel bad about it. I am here to listen, and allow you that room to give yourself grace, because oftentimes it's not really the other person that's not giving you grace, it's yourself. So
That's
I find that giving them the agency to say, you know what, it's okay. Right? I've gone through that. That is not who I am. It was an experience, but that's not the totality of me as a person. And
Mhm.
really taking away that permanence helps them, helping them realize that it was a point in time, a temporary thing that took place. They made a mistake, whatever it was, but it did not define their journey. Right? It actually probably helped them to get to where they are in this point. They may not be able to see it, but allowing them to take that moment to kind of see it from a holistic standpoint typically helps.
Yeah. So I'm watching this show on Apple TV. It is called the big the big prize door the big door prize or something to that effect.
The
I'll figure it
big door. Oh, I'm gonna have to check this one out. It sounds interesting.
out. But it's so weird. So listen, it's a series and it's about a little town where this machine mysteriously ends up in one of their local stores. And the machine tells you your life potential. So you put your hand on the glass and you give your social security number, and they spit out life potential. So some people have their cards just, and they're just one word. And some card may say royalty, another one said like liar, another one said hero, and right there. So and some of them are like like actual like priest, like actual right um, uh, occupations. And so the whole town is going bananas because they have their cards and they're actually relating to their cards. It's truth now. And everyone's kind of in this frenzy and they've agreed that this is your truth. This is who you are. And
Mm.
they're taking it on. And so now you have people getting divorced because my card says royalty and yours says janitor. How's this going to work? So like
Wow.
all of these things are happening. And so I think the show for me represents this thing that we have in society, in our society, of once we agree on something and we accept it as truth, a lot of times we're not investigating or pushing it against it or going, does this resonate with me? Does this resonate with my truth? But now everybody's in a frenzy because of some outside stimulus that has now told them, here's what your potential is in life. And so my question to you, because there actually was a question with this long roundabout story, my question is,
It's all good.
how does that show up in your practice where people, is it that they don't see potential in themselves? Is it that they don't have it, or it's just not clear? Is it that people come to you because they don't see for themselves the way, like what's possible for them? And we get into a spiral because we just figure this is my life. And so I'm asking like how that kind of plays out in your practice and the people that you work with.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's a like two groups of people. There's one group who does see that potential. They're confident. They just don't have the clarity on how they're going to get there, right? But they know it's possible, or at least they believe it's possible. And then there's the other group who, externally they look like they're crushing it, right? They're high achievers, but internally they do not. They are that butterfly and they cannot see their own wings, right? So they don't know how beautiful they are. They don't know what they're capable of. And they always shortchange themselves and say it's not enough. So one of the things that we like to do is the root cause analysis. Why do you feel, well, even if you're overconfident, why do you feel that way? Like, where's it coming from? Why do you believe something is true? And why do you believe something is not true? In your situation. And I do a talk about labels, like you're talking about. Oftentimes, someone else has placed a label on us somewhere along our journey, and it has impacted us in ways that we can't quite understand. And that's why that root cause analysis becomes so important, because you start asking yourself, is this my voice or is it someone else's voice? Where did I get that from, right? A lot of our beliefs, our behaviors, our values come from someone else or something else, right? Our environment, our familial aspect, authoritative figures, institutions, whether it be school, military, etc. So we have to kind of be willing to challenge those to say, okay, that belief, do I really believe that, or was that embedded to me? Was I just assimilated to believe that that's what was supposed to be possible? So that shows up often in my practice. So I always tell my clients before we even start working together, I'm going to challenge you, right, on some things. So just be ready for that. All right.
So when I think about grace and everything that you just said and being willing to challenge people like, I think that people are in love with the idea of getting a coach and a therapist, or I'll say more of a coach, because these are different modalities, right? But I would say people are in love with the idea, and they want that coach that's going to kick them in the butt. And that's what people say, right? Because if I could do it, I would have done it. And so I need somebody who's going to give me some of that tough love and, hold me bigger than I know myself to be, and not let me get small. And right. And so you're that person. And then in reality, when the rubber meets the road, it's time for them to be accountable to their word, accountable to what they said they wanted for themselves in their life. Here comes the resistance. So when at those moments, when I'm just like locked into my fear and I'm locked into my hardwired beliefs of no possibility, Jevon would step in and say,
yeah, I mean, in those moments, and this is a great time for people to understand that a coach does not need to have the answer, right? A coach is there to help you find the answer, right? So I will not be prescriptive. I will ask the powerful questions to get you to identify why you're holding on to that fear and how do we release it, right? And what's important about you releasing that fear, right? What is it holding you back from? Is it aligning with you as a person, or at least the person you want to become? So there's a lot there. Sometimes that tells us more than the success, right? When we just seem to be hitting that wall, what is it telling us? So I look at that as an informational point, right? Where we can start saying, okay, it's something that we can dig deeper on there, right? Has this happened before? Is this the first time? Is this situational? Is there a pattern that we could recognize to get even more information, right? A couple of exercises that we can do. It's so much there that we can kind of discover from. So I don't mind those times, right? That's actually why I feel like people want to coach, is because they know that there might be something there. And it's not necessarily that they can't do it on their own, but they kind of want to expedite the process, or they know that they won't do it on their own simply because maybe they don't feel like they have the resources, right? Whether the resources are the skills, whether it's the time, the knowledge, whatever it is, right? So I like to. That's where the fun begins for me when it comes to coaching, is helping them uncover what was once covered.
So so you talk about the, gosh, I want to say the five. What's your modality? The 5 why?
The 5 whys.
Yeah, the 5 whys. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So the 5 whys really comes from asking the person why 5 times, right? We hear about that exercise. So I decided to make a play on that and say why, like the letter Y. And the first why is the yardstick, right? That's the goal, but we also want to understand why that goal is important. Why does it even matter that we're going to hit that goal? What obstacles may we face on the way to that goal? Because you need to have some contingencies there. The second why is yield, right? What levers can we pull? Levers being resources, right? Can we pull that we currently have? And then what are we going to need that we don't have, right? So it's really taking inventory. It's kind of like, the skills assessment that we all know, Clifton strengths and all that other stuff, right? But it's a different level to what we do in this yield section. The third why is YAR. It's a boating term. How do we make this thing easier? How do we make it easier to accomplish that goal? Right. And underneath that is this what I call the 3DA success formula. And that's delegate, delete, delay, automate. So delegate tasks that you know you need to get done, but maybe not necessarily by you. And then you're going to delete things that really do not serve the goal or the purpose, right? Oftentimes we have those to-do lists, those checklists that look great, but really we aren't doing anything. And that kind of boils down to what I call the rocks, pebbles, and sand, right? Rocks are the revenue generating activities. Those are the must-dos. The pebbles are those tasks that, again, they should get done for the greater good or the greater mission, but not necessarily by you. So you're going to get rid of those, delegate those. Then the sand, that's what we need to just delete, right? Why are we doing these little small things like clearing out our email, every day? For wasting, hours.
Why you look at me when you say that, Jevon? Why you scared to say at me when you said that?
I'm just saying, Dr. Majors, I'm just saying. I didn't know if it was you, but so it's for somebody.
Listen, I
love.
I had that like epiphany the other day, where when I'm so overwhelmed, that is literally. I'm gonna tell you my mind thought, my process around that. I feel like at least I'm doing something, right? I'm so overwhelmed. I don't know where to start. I don't even know how to ask my assistant to support me sometimes, where I'm just like, I'm taking on too much. And goodness gracious, thank goodness I have an assistant that's like, I got it, just go somewhere. Let me take it. But it's real. Like those checkout things that we do, all that sand. And like sand, put it into it makes things gritty, makes things harder to.
It makes it gritty.
Yeah.
Absolutely. No, and thank you for sharing that, because those tell us something, right? As a coach, I'm going to be like, okay, so when you do that, is there have you recognized a pattern, right? Of certain tasks that you have to do that you start procrastinating on. Right? When you don't know what to do, how do you handle that? Right? Do you create that list? Do you have a prioritization? Are you like, why do you feel stuck? Right? So there's a lot that we can find out there by you doing that procrastination. So that's good. That's a good thing. And then the automation, the A is automate. Now, a lot of people I know think automation through technology It's not always technology. Sometimes, like you said, your assistant, you know that you can pass off some tasks that's going to get done by that assistant constantly. You don't really have to check in. Maybe you want to report or something occasionally, right, to see how things are going, but you know it's done. You've just automated that task via delegation, right? So those two can go hand in hand. So that's YAR. That's making it easy. And in that, I typically find out what's happening for my clients, just like that. What just happened for you, right? You found out that you procrastinate when those same tasks. And then the fourth Y is yoga. Now, when I thought of a yogi when I was creating this, I thought of grace, I thought of strength, in positions that most of us cannot maintain or even get into, right? So I want your business and your life to be the same, right? I want you to maintain flexibility. I want you to be strong, and I want you to be strong and graceful in that, right? So when something does come up, it does not completely derail us. We're able to deal with that adversity, and we're able to breathe through it, calm ourselves, regroup, do whatever we need to do so that we can move forward, right? So that's what the fourth Y is. And the fifth Y is yearn. And yearn, from a personal standpoint, is getting your people, like your support system, right, to cover you, to help you, to move you forward. And from a business standpoint, it's how do you get customers and your employees really singing your good graces, right? So you can really get to that point where you're trying to reach whatever that goal was, right? So that's the 5Y framework in a nutshell.
Oh, that's great. I was wondering when you said yield, immediately I was like, oh, yield to a higher power, or yield to a process, or a universal truth about whatever that universal truth is. It could be law of attraction. It could be God. It could be, we have a dog.
Yeah, you heard my little guy. he's liking what you're talking about with the.
I know. I hear. I'm getting some confirmation over there.
Absolutely.
But yes, it could be yielding to the 4 agreements, right? Whatever it is that grounds your body, or connects you to the higher forces that are available to us. Whatever that is, I was like, oh, that was the first one. Great, yield. But I think you came back to it with the yoga piece, and that's where is a lot of being flexible and malleable, and having that grace, but also being clear about what the poses are and what they should look like, and just constantly staying true to the practice of yoga. Right?
Yes.
Is there any other way? Is there any other way that you acknowledge or connect people or embrace, since we're all different in our beliefs and faiths? Is there a way that you tie that into your work?
I'm sorry, what was the last part?
Is there any way that you tie that into your work, that whole realm of spiritual, or is the yoga the way?
No, I mean, there are a multitude of ways to tie that in. I mean, everything I do is grounded on that, because I feel like whatever the higher power is, it really allows us. I mean, that's where really faith and belief is coming from, right? To be able to say, I don't need to see it. It does not necessarily need to be tangible, but I know that it is a possibility. And if my clients do not have that, it's really hard, no matter how great a coach you are, or anyone's clients, it's really hard to move them forward if they don't have a belief in something higher. Because when that adversity hits, they're going to constantly feel like, oh, woe is me, I have to do this on my own. Right. So that has to be, it's kind of grounded theory, right? Everything we do has to be based on that preliminary. And how I kind of find that, right, is that values assessment. What are their values? What is their foundational basis? Because once we do that, then I know that we have something to build on. So that's where that comes from. So it's really a theme throughout every part of that framework. I don't think we would be able to get where we get with our clients if we didn't have that higher power and that spiritual realm as you said.
So, speaking of higher power, what kind of work did you have to do? What kind of
Ooh.
reflection work? What kind of growth work? I'm also curious to know if there was anything related to you as a Black man specifically that you had to kind of breathe through in order to be vulnerable or in order to work with particular kind of groups or people. What was your inner process and inner work like to be the
Oh,
coach you are?
great question, Dr. Majors. I mean, this could be an episode in itself because the work is constant. It does not stop, right? And that's why I like, mindfulness practice, yoga practice. Everything is a practice. We don't get it right, but we try to be our best version of ourselves each day. And a lot of what I had to get through was the traumas from my youth, and even traumas that I didn't have anything to do with, those generational ones, right?
Mhm.
Growing up in Rochester, New York, growing up in poverty, I had to get over all of that. And it took a lot of therapy, took my own coaching. You asked me earlier, do I have a coach? I constantly have to do that because I need to check in and make sure that that's not what is the driving force between my goals and my shortcomings, right? So I did a lot of therapy, some cognitive behavioral therapy. I actually suffer from like PTSD and severe depression. So I constantly have to check in with myself and decide to win every day to make sure it does not overtake me. I still do meditation. I do gratitude practice every morning, and not just to the higher power, but to myself for getting to where I am right in that moment. So I make sure I do that constantly. And then, there's this, I always look back to see how far I've come, right? And I learned this because I didn't used to acknowledge my own successes. So I was one of those people who seemed to be doing well that I talked about earlier in my client base. I was that person where I would always need to do something new, never sat to celebrate or acknowledge anything. So I had to overcome that. And then to get into those rooms that I'm in today, I had to realize that I belong there, right? I deserve to be there. So that work as a Black man is very important because oftentimes, and I'm sure you know this as a Black woman, oftentimes you're the only or one of the few. And that can be hard work in itself, and people don't understand what that takes to look around and say, okay, now they're going to look at me as the representative
The
for
person.
the person, right? And we saw that a lot in COVID. They would ask the one Black person, what do you think about this DEI initiative? Right, stuff like that. So, to be able to get over that and speak your own truth, right? And to say, I am not the representative. I am here representing me, right? And what we need to do is get more of people who look like me and share experiences like me, etc., in this room. If you want to do that, right? We need to develop a quorum, not just have that one person, right? So being able to speak that, there was a lot of work there. So it's just a constant thing. It's a constant evolution. And it's also the ability to give myself grace when I do fall short, because I've learned that success is insulated by failures, right? If we did achieve that success, we would not be ready for it if we did not trip and stumble along the way. Because that's how we're able to kind of reverse engineer it and do it again and build on it again and again and again, as we've learned from those shortcomings when things did not go right.
Yeah. So, what does vulnerability to you look like? And can you give me an example of when you've had to be vulnerable?
Oh, vulnerability is strength first and foremost. I want the listeners to understand vulnerability is a strength. And this is something I actually talked about in my book. It was a whole chapter on it, my book, Own Your Kingdom, how vulnerability allowed me to sit in front of you today and be on this podcast. One of the first times I can recall really tapping into that vulnerability from an external standpoint was I had came back from my deployment in Afghanistan, and I was having suicidal ideations. And that one moment I had to call my sister and say, hey, something's not right. I don't know if I can do it. And that vulnerability allowed her to be the messenger to give me 2 words, get help. And that was freeing for me because I had felt like I had to be Superman as the man of my family, So that's when I realized how powerful vulnerability is. And being vulnerable every day, right? When I come up and show up here and I tell these stories, and I talk my truth, especially as a speaker, but getting up on those stages, sharing those stories. Sometimes it does not come out the way I wanted to come out because those emotions kind of come back up as if I'm in that moment. Right. So being vulnerable enough to say, hey, I need y'all to bear with me. I'm going to need y'all strength right now because that emotion hit me more than I expected. Right. So there's so many moments and points throughout life that the vulnerability just has to take its space.
And so that vulnerability, I know, often feels like no control, a loss of control. And the thing that I really appreciate about what you said is that, and this is what, I do a lot of things probably not right or not the best, or I made a lot of mistakes or all these things. But one thing I can say about myself is that I'm going to tell one on myself before you get to make it a thing, right? And I think that when we do that as leaders, it gives people permission to be flawed because we are anyway, right? And so the work we do to pretend that we're not flawed and we're not this and we're not, that's why blood pressure is high and anxious, and because we're trying to uphold something that is absolutely goes against what humanity is, and that is ups and downs and failures and wins and losses and learning lessons and so when we pretend like, when we take all of that stuff out of the narrative, then you have these people that you can't relate to. But everybody can relate to being able to say something and that unexpected thing grabs you, like in mid presentation or mid sentence or mid whatever. I was saying something, see, here it comes, thinking about my grandmother. And it was about, I was talking to somebody, she had passed 3 years ago. And I was talking about my graduation and my doctorate. And I was like, that was their gift. Like they created that degree for me. I was the vessel that did the work and stayed up and studied, but it was her graduation and moment as much as it was mine. And she had passed like 3 or 4 years ago, and I grieved her. I was sad now, but in that moment, I was like, "Uh-oh, here it comes, here it goes. It ain't gonna stop. It's here." So I better name this so that people don't get weird, because people get weird when they see you trying not to be human, right?
Yes.
So like being able to name it, and I think that the coaches and the people who are out there saying, there's freedom on the other side of you crying and saying, hey, y'all, give me grace here because this is happening. This is coming, right? And I think that gives people that freedom. That's why that show, circling it back to, see how good I am at this, circling it back to that show, which is they had permission. You get a card that says be an artist and you don't like being an attorney. There's freedom in just being able to abandon what you know and just go do the thing. And I think a lot of us would do so much more if we had that permission. And I think that's what coaches do. They give you that permission to be who you are, and to they see you as that artist when you are filing briefs or doing stuff that you don't want to do. So I think about that. Did you want to add anything, say anything about that? Did you have any thoughts about anything?
I just loved everything you said. I think that you said permission. And that is one of the toughest concepts for a client to grasp. It's like, you mean to tell me I can do this, or I do not have to be in this box? And one of the things that has been a constant, I've been doing this for some years now. One of the things that has been a constant is people they're so used to being known as one thing, and they lead with that one thing. That becomes their identity. And when you say, hey, you are more than that, right? You are multifaceted. It's kind of like a light bulb goes on. It's like, and it's so interesting to me. So I love that you said that about the permission, because I want the listeners to go ahead and give themselves permission right now to say, hey, I can be more. There is not this one thing that defines me. In our lives, give us so many different experiences, and that we often say that we are not qualified to live and be for whatever reason. Well, I just want them to know that they are qualified to live and be. So that's all I would like to add.
Yeah, without limits. And I think that we tend to, one of the things I hated the most was doing my resume, because there's so many things that I do, I do well, right? And so when you're doing a resume, they want you to focus on this thing or focus on, and so I'm going to interview my primary doctor on this in a few days on Friday. And she is my primary care physician. She is my gynecologist. She is my esthetician. I only use her skincare products. She makes her own line of skincare products, right? She has written a book she's a vegan. So she's written a book, she's a Black woman. She is, has 2 young kids, and she wrote a book about young folks and eating right. And she's a wife, and she's in community doing, she does it all. And I think that we are so confined to that identity piece, right? Where we find something and that's our identity. You couldn't call her just a doctor. She's so much more than that, right? And
Absolutely.
Also, sometimes, unfortunately, it seems that our identity is then latched to also illness. That person who complains about their gout their whole life, or complain about, oh, I ain't got no money, child, or constant, that has become their identity. So how do you pull apart in your work the identity piece, where you're trying to get them to see a way out stratospherically, and they're like, I can't see that because my identity is based on me being small and being sick and being whatever the case may be.
Absolutely. And that's a great question. And that again ties to this whole labeling and permanence, right? Allowing them to understand that it's a temporary thing, right? And that's what we have to remember. It's like, just because, for instance, I went from cybersecurity to now doing this coaching thing, right? A lot of people always ask me, like, what made you do that? Well, because cybersecurity was just a role for me. It was not who I was, right? It was a role, and getting them to understand that it is a role that you have served in, right? That does not mean that it's always going to serve you, right? So you have to really see yourself, right? Okay, this is me. Let's separate this and understand that this is a something I've done, right? Something I have, right? I'm a mom. This is a label. These are all labels that are help to make me who I am. But I have, once again, the freedom to say, I want to add another, right? I'm going to do this now, right? So that's how I get them to see that, to understand that, that one decision does not mean you have to stay on that path, right? We are people that we can decide to do different things, right? Who you are changes, your mind state changes, right? So go for it, right? Go for it. And a lot of people always say the what ifs, right? When you tell them to go for it. I like to challenge them on that too. I say, what if it works? Right? Because oftentimes we focus so much on the negative things, like what if it does not? Right. What if it does? Right? What do you, so that's how I challenge them on that.
Yeah, that is so good. And it is amazing to me. And I've been the person that would argue for my limitations. No, I'm too, no, I can't do that.
We all have.
So we argue for our limit, but don't realize that we're arguing for being limited and being small but all of that is about being safe. I want my world contained. We have 2 German Shepherds. One is like, let me out of here. Let me be free. The other one is, if you leave the door open, she will go down in her crate and she's just like the world. I like my world small. I like it contained. I like to know what's happening. And so she's the one that's, protecting. And the other one is the one that's like wants to explore and do all these things. Right. And so I think a lot of people just want to know, because I think of childhood trauma, that we've all had some form of trauma.
Yes.
Predictability is important, right? Predictability and being able to know what's happening. And so when you start talking about stuff that you can't predict, i.e. freedom, abundance, all that stuff is unpredictable, right? Like you don't know who you have to be to get there, or what that's going to take. So I love that you bring all of that up. And I also love that you go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say one thing. I didn't mean to interrupt, but one thing about predictability is it's unpredictable. Right? This is life after all. So we really can't predict anything. We don't control any outcomes. Anyway. That's another thing I like to bring up is like, you can look to protect yourself behind those excuses. But when you really think about it, that thing can still find you, because the only thing constant is change. And, whether you look to try to impact that and influence it or you don't, that little bubble that you tried to create, something's going to disrupt that, right? In some way, shape, or form. So you might as well go out there and challenge yourself and have a little fun.
You might as well. And I think that you alluded to this earlier. You might have said it right out, but you weren't given all of the stuff you're protecting. You didn't create that anyway. So somebody hands you an identity and hands you your values and hands you your beliefs. And now you go around the world with this box of stuff that was given to you, protecting it as if it were your own, but it's not even your own, right? It's just, right? So I really appreciate this conversation. I want to end with a question that I ask everybody. So on a scale from 1 to 10, 1 is, I do not like this life. I want a do-over. This should not have been my life. I hate it here. Let's just call it. And 10, I could not imagine a more amazing, fulfilling, blissful life. Like, you gave this life to me. Like, wow, this is my life. Okay. What would you rate your life in its totality, not pockets, but in its totality? And if it's not a 10, do you know what would make it a 10?
Yes. I will say mine is a 9. There's always room for improvement, right? But what I will say, the reason why I rated a 9, if I have time to. Okay. So I rated a 9 because I have, we all, just as we all have, I've gone through some very, like you said, traumatic experiences in my life, right? Which has allowed me to really appreciate everything that I have now. So I always say I get to do things, right? No matter how tired I am, whatever. Now, the reason why I took a point off is because the one thing that I would love to do more of is make more impact, right? And that's why I still have that point, because I still feel like I have not, through all the gifts that God has given me, I have not tapped into all of them in a way that I know He wants me to do. So I'm working on it, but then that'll be a 10.
Okay. All right. That is awesome. Thank you for that. Well, thank you so much. Where can people find you, Jevon?
Yeah, LinkedIn is the number one platform for me. Just search my name, Jevon Wooden. You'll see a light bulb next to my name. Go ahead and connect with me. Shoot me a message. I'd love to speak with you. Or you can go to my website, brightmindcg.com, and go ahead and shoot us a message.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Jevon, and we'll talk to you again. Be well.
Hey, thank you so much for having me, Dr. Majors. I appreciate you.
Hey, everyone. I hope you enjoyed what you heard today. If you did, please click the small bell and become a subscriber and join me in spreading the message of grace.